Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to BEAMA's Net Zero Week event. I'm Nuzella Farmer, Director of Public Affairs at BEAMA, and today we're going to be discussing net zero delivery across our sector. BEAMA represents manufacturers of electrotechnical products. We represent around 200 manufacturers with operations in the UK, from multinationals to SMEs. We're taking this opportunity this week to really celebrate best practice in our industry and celebrate the progress that our members have been making in delivering their net zero commitments. We published our industry climate commitment just before COP26 last year, and I think quite a lot of progress has been made since then. So we're going to really be focusing in on that today, but also shedding a bit of light on the reality of setting and meeting net zero targets within the industry and industrial decarbonisation across the supply chain. I'm joined by a fantastic group of panellists today from our membership, range of company sizes, stages that they're at in terms of their net zero delivery, and I think we're in for a really great discussion. A few practical points before we get stuck into the meat of the event in terms of how we run these events. All the attendees will be able to present questions in the chat, and we really encourage attendees to do so. I want this to be as interactive as we can, and I will pick up on the audience questions later on in the event. If you have any technical issues, please mention them in the chat. My colleague Simon Harpin is behind the scenes and will be able to help you if there are any issues. Just as a reminder as well, at BEAMA, we obviously run all our meetings and events following competition compliance rules, and we will do the same for this event. I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves and give a bit of background to their company. I'll move across my screen to go through the panelists. So Eloise.
Good afternoon. So I'm Eloise. I'm a Sustainable Development Project Manager for the UK and I at Schneider Electric. So I'm part of our internal sustainability team, working with our sites in the UK and I to implement our sustainability strategy. So anything from decarbonisation, but also biodiversity. For anyone that doesn't know, Schneider Electric provides energy and automation solutions to improve efficiency and sustainability for our customers. We're 135,000 people worldwide, and we're in 100 countries.
Thanks, Eloise. Brendan. You're muted, Brendan.
There you go. Is that working?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm Brendan White. I'm Commercial Director at Nexus, which is part of Luceco PLC, who do all the different electrical bits all over the place. They're a big company. They've made great strides with becoming carbon neutral, which they achieved sort of late last year, which was good. But as a new part of the company, we thought it was important to develop products with the environmental factor sort of right in the forefront. So we've tried to design products which are predominantly used in the office industry, really, and commercial office industry, that can be easily sort of customized or whatever else to use environmental products. So a lot of waste which we use from our customers and everything else, and that's it, really.
Thanks, Brendan. And Matt.
Okay.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name's Matt Crunden. I'm the training and BEAMA manager for Legrand UK and Ireland. I'm finding that within my job, I'm beginning to touch a little bit more on sustainability and energy efficiency issues that I'll explain a little bit more. I've got a small presentation I'll go through with you shortly, so I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we go along.
Thanks, Matt. And Sean?
Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Sean Smith, Managing Director of Michael Smith Switchgear, a low voltage switchgear manufacturer based in Leicester. we're an SME ourselves, sort of 38 people in one division and 12 in another. We're sort of making massive headway in driving ourselves forward to be sustainable and more sustainable in a manufacturing industry that's predominantly using a lot of raw materials. And yeah, we've made massive headway, which hopefully we'll talk about shortly as well.
Thank you. And Stuart?
Yes, good afternoon all. My name's Stuart Smith. I'm the Group Sales Director for Genuit's Ventilation and Climate Division that incorporates Nuair and Domus. We're a global ventilation manufacturer, employ around 600 people worldwide. We manufacture most of our products down in South Wales at our state-of-the-art facility, and we're really passionate about operating our facility at minimal impact on the environment. So we are driven by ambition targets and drive forward green manufacturing processes.
Thank you. And I'm gonna start the discussion by coming to each of our panelists now to ask them what stage their company is at with regards to setting and delivering on their net zero targets. We're going to come to Matt first, who's going to give a bit of a presentation on the work that Legrand have been delivering recently. So Matt, over to you. I believe we're going to share your slides for you. There we go.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you, Simon, for rescuing me with the slide sharing. It wasn't working for me a moment ago, so Simon's going to just drive the slides for me. If you, perfect, it's in full screen now for me, brilliant. So yeah, this is just a 10-minute overview really of the Legrand Group and what we're looking to achieve. So we're a global manufacturer of electrical and digital infrastructure products and services. We employ about 36,000 people over the globe. We're present in 150 plus countries around the globe. So, you know, we're a big concern, and that's fantastic. But of course, these kinds of issues have challenges for us as well. So if you could just move to the next slide for me, Simon, I'd be grateful. Brilliant. So just one moment. There it is. Fantastic. So what you can see on the slide there are really our short-term action plans, which will help us to achieve our medium and long-term goals. So if your eyes are wandering across the screen there, you'll see from 2004 on the left-hand side over to 2022/2024 on the right-hand side, where it says 5th roadmap in that solid red box. So these are the roadmaps that we've had in place for a number of years now that are helping us to develop as a business. And just some key points, if I can highlight these for you as I go through. 2004, you can see it was the creation of a sustainable development function within the Legrand Group. So that was kind of the kickoff point for us, really. And as you can see, we delivered a couple of roadmaps over the next few years. But if you go over to about central on the slide there, the 3rd roadmap, 2014-18, there's a key milestone there, which is the first external audit of the group's CSR performance, which was a key event for us because that helped us to kick on to the next level. The 4th roadmap, 2021, you can see a 1.5% climate strategy that was approved by SBTi. And again, that was another key event for us. And in 2021 as well, we were awarded platinum status by EcoVadis, which is a sustainability credential assessment platform. And that's been really good for us actually, because we've been asked if, you know, what we get asked all the time, what are your sustainability or environmental credentials? And that helps us to answer some of that as we move forwards, which is really, really good. Moving to the right-hand side, you can see now the 5th roadmap that was launched in March of this year. So it's only a few months old right now. Now, there are 4 pillars within that roadmap that you can see on the screen. And they're all really, really important. But the one, of course, we're talking about now is reducing our carbon footprint. So if you could just advance the slide for me, please, Simon. We just dive into that carbon footprint element of the CSR roadmap in a bit more detail. So there it is on the screen, and you can see that I've put a red box around that central area where we've got the 3 key pillars of delivery, if you like, our key objectives. So I won't read all of those out for you right now because you can see those yourself. But effectively, within our 4-pillar roadmap, we've got 15 priorities, and they help to contribute to 10 of the 17 sustainable development goals that were set out by the UN. And you can see that number 7 and 13 fall within this reduction of our carbon footprint element. So hopefully while I've been talking there, you've managed to read those 3 elements on the right-hand side. But this is our short-term action plan that helps us deliver our medium to long-term. So if you could advance for me, please, Simon. Wonderful. So this is more around our medium and long-term commitments now. So what you can see on the slide there is obviously the commitment to reduce our carbon footprint. There are some 2030 targets on there and some 2050 targets which are more long-term. So the 2030 targets, you can see those, reducing our carbon emissions in our own activities by 50% and carbon emissions in our value chain by 15% through to 2030. But also to achieve 80% of our sales with eco-responsible solutions. So we have this eco-design process, if you like, at the heart of our business, which has been there now for a number of years. What you might also notice, and I'll just kind of qualify this as in the next minute or so, that our 2050 target doesn't say net zero, it says carbon neutrality. Now there's a reason for that. Firstly, because we are employing short-term roadmaps to take us to our long-term goal. Now, of course, we're only in 2022 right now. By the time our 6th roadmap comes out, and then our 7th and our 8th and our 9th, the market will have developed, technology will have developed, the way that we're looking at the world will have probably changed. So, you know, having a 2050 target for carbon neutrality, because I do believe carbon neutrality versus net zero is very, very similar. There are obviously some differences, net zero being fundamentally the harder one to achieve, if you like. But that's the reason why we have the carbon neutrality target for 2050 right now and not the net zero target. So this is an achievable target that we will be able to deliver on. Simon, if you could go to the next slide, please, if you don't mind. There we go. So, Legrand, we're engaged on all fronts. And again, I've just set out those 4 bullet points, which will show the things that we're trying to achieve. But when I say we're engaged on all fronts, that means that we're looking at this as a global process for the Legrand Group. And I said right at the beginning, you know, we're a big company, we're in lots and lots of different countries, lots and lots of different systems and things that make our business work. So engaging everything to achieve these targets is a challenge. It's quite difficult. But some of the things we can do is to, first of all, to engage our staff. So we've done some great communication channels within Legrand. We use BEAMA. I'm sure other people are familiar with that. They know what it is. But BEAMA allows us to reach out to all of the subsidiaries around the globe and connect them all together. And it means we can run campaigns and educational things that we can, you know, really reach out to all of our Legrand family around the globe and get people engaged in doing some fun activities as well that help us to educate people in net zero targets. You know, it's great having these targets of 2030 and 2050, but if we don't engage the people as well, then do you know what? It could be said that it's not going to happen. So getting our people involved is really important. We ran this Eco Gestures campaign where we were getting people involved in sending in solutions to energy problems they might have at home or in the office, sharing best practice, but also having a bit of fun as we were going as well. So there's things like that going on with Legrand, as well as those sort of corporate objectives as well. So the next slide, please, Simon, if you wouldn't mind. And there's some of the little photographs and pictures of some of the things that we were trying to do. So making sure that people are using efficient heating systems if they can, using intelligent design, digital design. So trying to eliminate paper. That's actually my mug under the coffee machine in the kitchen. So obviously it's not a plastic mug, which is good. And, you know, virtual meetings. So we're eliminating the requirement, if you like, for driving to meeting venues all the time that we used to have prior to the pandemic and so on. So these things are in play with Legrand globally. Next slide, please, Simon. Next slide should be a little bit more focused on the UK level. So here we are. So we are engaged in various types of activities in the UK, and there's just a couple of them here on the left-hand side of that screen. I'm actually seeing two different slides at the moment. I think that the now and next might have popped up, certainly has for me. Anyway, it doesn't matter. On the left-hand side, we can see renewable energy photovoltaic panels, which have been installed on our concept manufacturing site. We installed those in 2019. And so far, we've managed to almost halve our energy use, which is fantastic. And of course, we're monitoring that with a really clever monitoring and reporting system as well, so we know exactly what's going on. We've got some more plans to be able to develop that as we move, you know, into other areas of the business in the future. We also developed a CPD seminar, which is around building an electrical backbone of a building, but using energy efficiency strategies and trying to cover all of those green issues if we can as much as possible. So that's been quite successful for us as well, I have to say. On the right hand side of the slide, it's actually jumped back to the introduction slide on my screen, but I think I can remember what's on there. So we have a program within Legrand based around being able to give our environmental credentials, particularly the carbon footprint of the majority of our products where possible, to the marketplace. So we use product environmental profiles, which follow the same methodology as EPDs. Product environmental profiles are specific to electrical, electronic, and HVAC materials, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it says that on the slide, doesn't it there? So we do have these product environmental profiles that are available free to download off our website for a lot of our products. So we're actively engaged in that kind of thing. I mentioned eco-design before. We're involved in building information modeling, because BIM is much more than just 3D models. Okay, so we're looking to improve the BIM offer that we have, factoring in some of the elements that we might need to see within the space of net zero and energy efficiency. But also there's a whole load of other things going on. So we're looking at improving some of our air maintenance systems, looking to make improvements, as you can see at the bullet points on the bottom, destratification fans in some of the factories that help to pull the warm air from the top of the factories down to the usable space where the people are, so we don't need to have the heating on so often. LED conversion across some of the factories and warehouses up and down the UK, new heating systems in place and UV blocking in one or two of the areas of the business where, again, we're looking to mitigate solar gain and stop the need to have heating on or the air conditioning running all the time, with some clever intelligent systems going on. So there's a lot of UK level things that I'm referencing here on this slide as well. And if you could just advance on to the next one, please, Simon. Our approach is that, you know, all of us working together in our business, we're stronger together. So we've got 6 individual business units you can see on the slide. And if you just pop the next slide up, Simon, please. All of the business units, whether you're working in cable management or through to user interface, are touching upon the green issues in one way, shape or form. So it really is moving across the whole business. And the next slide, please, Simon, if you wouldn't mind. Fantastic. So I think this is my final slide. Just a few key bullet point issues. You know, it's an integrated strategy within Legrand. The need to improve the way that we're operating, and you know, and and developing as we move forward. It's a structured approach through our CSR policy that's available for anybody to download and have a look at from the website. We actively listen to our stakeholders and engage with them, whether they're employees or customers or whoever they might be in our value chain. We listen, we engage with them. We're reducing the impact of our own activities with various initiatives I've tried to explain as we've gone through, continuing to work on that eco-design for the low carbon solutions. And perhaps the most important thing that we're doing is we're engaging, or we're trying to engage our entire Legrand family so that we can, we as a business can make this happen, because it's fundamentally important for, the marketplace that we operate in, the society that we live in. And there's a quote on there. I'm not going to read it. You might have read it already, from Fabio, our group energy manager. Just a few bits and pieces that he said. I thought it would be good to pop that on there as well. And just move to the next slide, please, Simon, if you would. Perfect. So hopefully that's our strategy in sort of 10 minutes or so. And thank you for listening to that.
Thanks so much, Matt. And I think I've jotted down quite a number of questions, which we'll come on to later in the panel session. It's prompted a lot of thought from me. I'm going to go around the panel now in terms of getting a bit more of an overview of their commitments and the stage they're at. And I'll start with Stuart, if that's okay, to hear a little bit more about their net zero plan going forward. Thanks, Stuart.
Yeah, hi. I don't know if I can share my screen. Yeah.
There we go, we can see that well.
You can see that, right, okay. So we've just unveiled our net zero roadmap, and that's been very recent. And it's to minimise our impact on the environment. And we've made a commitment, or the group have made a commitment, by 2025 to make a 66% reduction. The key point to note is that with no offsetting. So everything we do, we cannot offset. So we're going to do a 66% reduction. And I won't go through the map, but you can see the certain stages that we're at the moment. And we were very fortunate that 2015 we were members of the Carbon Trust, so we kept a lot of this information to give us a good starting point from. And we did a lot of work since then to now, reducing our impact. So we've still got a way to go, and we've still got the next phase to go. And the interesting to be is the science-based information. That's where we're in the middle of the moment, gathering all that information. And I'll probably talk about that a little bit later when some questions arise. But yeah, that's where we are as a ventilation and climate division across the group. And yeah, we're making good inroads.
Thanks, Stuart. And yeah, again, I think I've got a number of questions for you later in the panel.
Look forward to it.
So just coming round to our other panelists, I'll just go across the list in order that I have. Eloise, did you want to come in to share the background to Schneider's approach at the moment?
The mute button, standard. So in 2019, we launched our carbon pledge. And so it's a 4-step approach. So by 2025, we're looking to be carbon neutral in our operations. And then by 2030, net zero in our operations. And the difference there is around using offsets. So between 2025 and 2030, we'll use offsets. And then by 2030, no more offsets for our operations. And then we mimic that in 2040 and 2050, but covering our value chain. So by 2040, we'll have a carbon neutral value chain. And then by 2050, we're aiming for a net zero supply chain. Last year, we also launched kind of our new wider sustainability strategy, which launched a number of programs and quite a few that touch on how we're going to achieve our carbon pledge and have targets and specific things around that. But it's not just about carbon for us. We're also talking about biodiversity and resource use and whatnot. But I'll focus just on the carbon and the net zero for here. I think in terms of progress, last year we saw our scope 1 and 2 emissions decrease by 60% compared to our baseline of 2017, but just under 60%. But so we're making good progress, but we need to continue to drive that decarbonization across our sites, especially to get to that 2030 target of net zero. And to be frank, in the UK, that means getting rid of our natural gas consumption for heating, for example. So that's a big one for us in the UK and I. Some other key statistics for last year that kind of really led into our progress. we saw 82% of our electricity consumption across the group come from renewable sources. And we currently have 51 what we call zero CO2 sites, which means that these sites are essentially powered by renewable energy exclusively. And we do have 47 sites that have on-site renewable generation. And I guess one quick thing is that we're also going beyond the scope of our operations, because as I mentioned in our carbon pledge, we're looking at net carbon neutral value chains or net zero supply chains. And so we're starting to launch our programs on how we're going to tackle those. So to work with our suppliers on how they're going to reduce their emissions, but also working with our customers on how we can help them avoid and save emissions as well using our solutions. Thanks.
Thanks, Eloise. Really, really interesting. And if I come on to Sean.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, Michael Smith Switchgear, we manufacture low voltage switchboards for sort of schools, hospitals, airports, data centers, distribution centers, using a lot of products of a couple of the panelists that we've already spoken to, Legrand, Schneider, you know, they're big in our supply chain. We bought a lot of our manufacturing in-house for components that weren't being able to be purchased from those, and saw massive reductions in our carbon sort of emissions and our footprint, and also our productivity increase was incredible. And we did all the things that everyone says in general, you know, put solar panels on your roof, buy green energy where you can. So our sites and any electricity that we buy is 100% renewable and has been for years. So we then explored solar panels, and we've put 102 kilowatts of solar on our roof, and that was only installed last April. And since last April, we've generated 132,000 kilowatt hours, which is the equivalent of nearly 7,000 trees planted. So in that sort of short period, you can get some really, really big sort of paybacks, and nearly 90 tons of CO2 avoided in that time. As a relatively small company, you know, we've done a lot of this, not driven really by our customers. We're not getting requested it every day by sort of our customer base at the minute, and we're doing it because it's what we felt was right and wanting to make the change. And sort of a big part of it was when we started the journey as a business. I was in webinars and lots of other things, like I'm sure a lot of us have sat on, and a lot of you here today have sat on. And you know, the first things they say were, you know, bring in cycle to work schemes, let's remove plastic water bottles, let's, you know, do everything that we can. And I was actually sat in one of these BEAMA conference networking events and conferences about 10 months ago, pre-COP26 it was, and I sat there and sort of thought, well, we're pitching this, and there was a government department in the room, and they were pitching this as to a manufacturing community, you know, of engineers, innovators. But well, what can we do differently? So as an electrical engineering company, we sat there and sort of implemented different types of principles within our business, such as mechanical engineering, ventilation control, and we managed to bring those into our products. And by doing so, we managed to then reduce our copper consumption and the copper we were purchasing and installing into our switchboards by over 25%. You know, that's a massive cut both on carbon emissions and obviously cost, which we can then help pass on and pass to our customers. So there's a lot of misconception that green has to be expensive, and you know, for us, everything so far that we're doing is saving us money along the way as well. So we really want to sort of help drive that message forward. And as a business in our journey, actually only on Wednesday last week, we have achieved carbon neutrality, and we got all of our figures cross-referenced and confirmed, and we've become a carbon neutral business. So obviously something we're very proud of, but by no means perfect. We want to hit that net zero. You know, we do want to not have to offset anything, and we are only offsetting a very small amount now, just over 100 tons, which obviously is still 100 tons too many. But you know, for us to get to net zero, we need a lot of other things in place around us, which I know we are going to discuss later as well.
Thanks so much, Sean, and congratulations on the carbon neutrality status. That's a lot of hard work, and and time gone into that. And I really like your point about the fact that as a sector, we're engineers and innovators, so we can do this. And there's other, think outside the box. There's new and innovative methods that we can use to make this commercially viable as well, which is especially important as an SME. I want to come finally in terms of the round table on where our members are in terms of their stage of net zero commitments to Brendan White, to get an update from him. Brendan, if you could come.
Hi everyone. Is it all working? Yes, it is. Well, with us it's slightly different because Nexus is a small new part of quite a large PLC, and it was quite interesting looking at Luceco first of all, because Luceco, they're very much into the environmental, because they do the LED lighting, and a lot that's been their big push and mostly their biggest growth. And even though they've got all of that in place and it's all great and everything else, we looked at the individual parts of every single product and tried to work out if right at the design stage, if it could be done differently. Part of that was bringing internal products into the UK, and then working with our customers who may be end users, and looking at what waste they create to set up their offices and to get all the furniture onto site and all those sort of things. So we did a massive study into seeing what waste they create and how much goes off, funny enough, back to China and other places to get used. So we were sort of thinking, actually it's better if we can reuse that in the UK. So we've got a number of customers that we are in the process of using their waste and their plastic, which they use for packaging and protecting corners of desks and all sorts, and using that as the raw material for the casings of their electrical products, which end up on the desks of their future products in their offices and such like. There's been a lot of when I first sort of thought of this way of doing it, it seemed quite simple, and you sort of you sell the idea quite easily. But we found there was a lot of problems about how you can actually use these different materials and the different additives which can go into it, and different chemicals and everything else, which actually end up being just as bad for the environment and a lot more expensive. So we put a lot of work into working out the best way of actually doing that, and what that needed was a great deal of honesty with everyone through the supply chain, whether it's our factories, which in China, whether it's in the UK, the people who are purchasing it, or even the actual end user, and sort of explain that sometimes, like Sean was saying, it's good because sometimes you do make savings because you're not using sort of virgin material, but actually the process of actually doing it can sometimes make the products more expensive. So it's being transparent with that at the beginning, that actually if we're doing all this together, there's going to be some sort of some hard conversations sometimes about how it. The other thing we noticed as well is continuity can be a problem as well, because it's not an infinite amount of waste material. So it's those, like I said, honest conversations, sort of saying we can do this much, but we can't maybe do that much. So the actual supply may be a bit different sometimes. But we found that customers and end users have sort of engaged in it sort of pretty well. So that's where we're at the moment.
Brilliant, really interesting. Thanks, Brendan. And I like your point about honesty and transparency in the supply chain. And I think we're going to come on to that in some of the discussion.
Well, one of the first things we noticed was all business is margin driven, and we found that when you're doing something slightly different, and especially if you can sort of nail on the fact that it's for the environment and everything else, people want to start putting margin on that as well, and obviously that brings them. But I think sometimes you have to actually realize that some of it you have to just do and you have to sort of take the economy part of it and sort of not worry too much about sort of that element of it. It's going to be the same margins and everything else. then hopefully it grows.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one thing, you know, we're focused on in terms of our discussions with government and regulators, we've got to create a market where it's commercially viable to develop a net compatible product. And in some cases, customers are going to need to potentially spend more money to have a product that is more sustainable. And in that case, sometimes regulation might be required. And we might come on to that in the discussion that we have going forward. I'd like to invite all the panelists to kind of come on their cameras and as we now get stuck into a bit of a panel discussion. And I actually just want to pick up on a few points raised in some of those presentations. Starting with, I know Matt mentioned some really interesting points about engagement across the Legrand family, the Legrand group. Don't know if we've lost Matt, if he's still there. But a question to everybody really is, how are you reaching out to your employees and the people within the business? I hear a lot from our members that, you know, a net zero strategy in a company is very dependent on staff engagement. They have to own it and deliver it. So I'm really keen to hear your strategies in outreach in that way. Eloise.
You want me to go first?
Go on then, go on. Was that Sean or Stuart? Stuart.
Yeah, we've been really engaging with our staff. We do a lot of surveys with our staff. We talk to our staff about better practices, how we can do things better as a company. But we're also offering incentives, and one of the incentives we're doing now is electric cars. So because we've got such a large electric car fleet and we've got good buying power, we're obviously trying to incentivize our staff and their families to buy electric cars by giving them a discount, offering our buying power. And we've put the electric charging points, or we plan to put electric charging points around the sites as well. So we're really driving it hard with the staff. We really engage hard with the roadmap, and yeah, we do get good feedback. I think people realise that it's needed now, and it's so in the press and people talk about it. So when you talk about net zero, it was a very hard thing to describe at first because people couldn't understand it. But I think now, seeing it in the news, seeing it on the television, seeing people talk about it, it's a lot easier.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about people seeing it, and I think we've seen it in the company. We have a workforce that's really engaged around sustainability, and also because it's part of the core values of Schneider. So, you know, we're seeing people joining the company because of our sustainability track record as well, and so they're engaged from the get-go, which is great. And then, you know, we offer training, as I'm sure everyone else does. We have mandatory training, but we've taken it a bit of a step further and are giving access to what we call our sustainability school for really more in-depth training for those that want to take it on and take it a step further. And I think that's been a really nice initiative coming out of it, and seeing again the engagement coming out. We had a community impact in the UK and I where we did a seed planting event at all of our sites to get people to understand biodiversity, and the engagement, I was so surprised at how engaged we were across that, and those small things really got people engaged around sustainability, and which is really nice to see as well.
That's really interesting. So good on professional development and staff retention, and also maybe socially and kind of bringing your community of staff together as well. It has positive impacts on all those areas. Any more of the panelists like to come in on any of the kind of staff engagement piece?
From our side of things as well, we've got you know, I'd say earlier, an SME sort of size business, and we've got a lot of our team members on the workshop that, in honesty, a year ago weren't all that bothered, you know, and it became quite a challenge at first to really get it through to them as, you know, the importance for the next generations, and make them really understand why we're doing it as well. You know, of course, there'll be some people that are thinking, why we're wasting money doing that, you know, and you get that, I'm sure, within every business. But it only took a couple of the team members to really sort of engage with it, which of course we knew there would always be a few right from the start. And at that point, they championed it, and you know, the others were dragged along, whether they were kicking or screaming or whether they were sort of coming along with it. They love it now, and we have morning meetings every morning, sort of a toolbox talk with the team on the workshop. It's led by our production manager, And there'll be environmental things, sustainability things, operational things, of course, as well, that's in there. But every day there's a small briefing about bits of what we've done. And actually now, as soon as anything's coming up on the sustainability front, when we announced to the team last week that we were carbon neutral, it was a cheer around the place as if it was like we'd just won the World Cup or something, and how that's changed over the course of a year is unbelievable, really. And it's been driven very much by me and my co-director, because we are passionate about it. I scuba dive. I've seen firsthand the mess of the oceans and the change that we need to try and pause/reverse if possible. But it's getting that message across without sounding like a preacher to everyone, really, as a whole.
That's really good to hear. A sense of pride as well, working for a company that's delivering on this and proving delivery as well. Matt, did you have anything further to add in terms of the engagement across the Legrand group?
Yeah, just a little bit. I tried to explain, obviously, in the presentation, some of the little things that we're doing, which have been quite successful. But obviously, being a large manufacturing company, there's some challenges around getting everybody involved, because we have connected staff and we have unconnected staff, people who may be working on the shop floor in a factory. But with the connected staff, excuse me, it's much easier to send out a communication about things that we've done. For those staff who are not connected, it's much more of a challenge. So we actually have an internal magazine that we publish fairly frequently, and that goes to all the connected staff in a digital format, but it also gets printed. And I know it's the use of paper and so on. We're trying to get away from that, but at the moment that's the way we have to do it. But we can distribute that around the business so people can see what's going on with things as well. We've got various other things that we're doing as well in terms of remuneration sometimes, in terms of the package that you might have and the goals and the KPIs you might have for sustainability, targets to achieve, that type of thing. And then I think it's up to the management to drive that down to the people who are the feet on the ground, so to speak. So there's a lot of things that we're doing, but I think listening to some of the things that other people on the panel are doing, some of the things that they're talking about, and congratulations, Sean, for getting to that level. I think it's fantastic. I think they're inspiring. So there's a lot that we can do currently, but there's certainly a lot that we can do better.
Thanks. No, I think that's some really good messages there. And just for the benefit of the panel, because it's with 5 panelists, it's sometimes difficult. I don't want to miss anyone if you've got anything to say, so feel free to raise a physical hand if you want to jump in and you feel you haven't been able to. And I know, on the kind of staff engagement, employee stuff, I see so much more across our membership, roles and positions emerging that have net zero in the title and that are really directly linked to net zero strategy delivery, beyond the traditional sustainability management that we've seen for many years. I feel like a real growth in responsibility areas across the businesses. And actually that kind of picks up on a question I had from Matt, just one that cropped up when I was thinking about it. How does a BIM manager cross over with net zero strategy delivery in Legrand? Between building information management and modelling and net zero.
I could make a really flippant reply and say I was the last one to put my hand down, but it wasn't quite like that. So my main responsibilities within the business are training and building information modelling, and those two things go hand in hand. But what I've found over the past few years, certainly probably the last 3 or 4 more than anything else, much more now, is that there seems to be a direct link between the building information modeling element of a project and the sustainability element of a project, because teams need to collaborate a lot more these days, but also we've got the digital capabilities to allow us to collaborate more as well, which means we can engage with other people a lot better than we did before. And BIM's a lot more than just a pretty set of 3D models. it's a lot more than that. It's all about the whole design and build and handover and operation of the building. So sustainability and energy efficiency and the net zero targets fit directly into that. It's all about digitization and, utilizing structured data. We want structured data in BIM, we want structured data in sustainability with the, if you think about PEPs and EPDs and that kind of thing. So it just seems to have been the case that I'm finding a lot of people I speak to in the industry who deal with BIM or deal with sustainability have quite a crossover now from one discipline, if you like, to the other. So that's really how it is that I'm kind of a lot more involved in this type of thing now, just because of the nature of it all.
It's just really interesting to hear how that evolves within the business and the products you're delivering as well. I want to come on to quite an important question. I think I said at the start, we want to shed a bit of light on the reality of what it's like to set these targets and deliver them at company level. But what are the key, coming to each of you and, raise a hand if you want to jump in first, but what are the key barriers you each face in progressing your net zero targets? Because, we've got to be realistic. We know it's not all plain sailing. Yeah.
So if I could jump, it's obviously net zero is very hard to achieve unless the entire supply chain is net zero. Our biggest thing, as you probably picked up at this my last sort of minute or two ago, was people. In educating people, employees, but not just the employees, the customers, the supply chain. From our side of the business, I know speaking to Legrand previously and Schneider, they've been requested a lot for product data, carbon emission reports, carbon weight of a product, etc. And so far, the customers that have asked us for anything to do with our reporting, anything like that, is a round number, 0. Not one of our customers have yet asked us, because it's very much price-driven market. We're dealing with contractors in that supply chain, and so really, I think for net zero as a whole, it needs to come from the top down, to legislation, to all of these sort of the larger companies to then have to provide it. So the big sort of investment funds that are building these big sort of industrial units, they must be asking these questions into their developers and then the contractors down the chain. But also, like I said earlier, we buy bits from Schneider, Legrand, plus many other suppliers. And as you can tell, both of your businesses have come on leaps and bounds and really leading the way in sustainability and carbon neutrality and on the path to net zero. However, until the entire supply chain is net zero and carbon neutral down the line, we can't be fully net zero. And I'm sure that's probably the same for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And maybe I think the point about multinationals, when they move, they pull the supply chain along with them. Kind of just handing over to one of our multinationals like Eloise, what are you doing to engage your supply chain to kind of progress that?
Yeah, I mean it's a great point that we can't be net zero if our supply chain is not net zero. And so kind of as part of one of our programs this year, last year we launched the Zero Carbon Project, where we're working with our top 1,000 suppliers to help them reduce their operational emissions by 50% by 2025. And these top 1,000 suppliers, they represent a significant portion of our supplier emissions, about 70%. So working with them will have a pretty decent impact, pretty sizable impact. And so we started off with them asking to, calculate their carbon emissions, or if they already had it, to provide it. And then really from there, we want them to set some really ambitious targets to decarbonize by 2025 and further out. And then, start developing and deploying a sustainability strategy. Now, we're not just telling them to do this, though, and then kind of leaving them alone to sort it out by themselves. We've created a platform for them to use where we've basically, it's a space where they can share together. There's best practice on there. We've put training up and we've hosted training for them. It's a bit of a hand-holding process for our suppliers that need it. And we really wanted to provide kind of capacity building, thought leadership, resources, and really importantly, that support to the suppliers, because we do want to pull them up with us. And I think as a company, you know, we're a leader in sustainability, and I think with that we have a responsibility to bring the value chain up with us and help them navigate through the sustainability kind of minefield that it is sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's excellent, Eloise, what you're doing, what you've just explained there, because our target is 250. Your target is 1,000. 250 is tough. So it's very difficult to do that, but it's right. We need to help and educate wherever possible, don't we, so that we can make these steps.
Any others of the panel want to come in on that point? I think it's brilliant to hear this progress that's being made, because I know right from the start, when we started working with our members on this net zero delivery topic, you know, engaging with global supply chains is top of the list in terms of challenges, and that kind of touches on one of the points that Sean made actually about reporting and requests for data. I think it depends which market you're in, whether you're getting large numbers of requests or not. And I wondered if I might come to the panel and ask the rest of you what that looks like for you. Are you getting lots of requests from customers for carbon? Yeah, Stuart.
Yeah, I mean, I echo what Sean said. Some of our smaller clients are not asking for net zero and they're not really interested, but we're certainly seeing a greater demand from our larger clients now, asking for our roadmap, asking for our commitments, and also asking for the TM65 reports on our products to show the embedded carbon in our products. So luckily we spent a lot of time and effort putting those TM65 reports together, so we can offer that. But going back to everyone being net zero, part of our roadmap is we state that we will only deal with suppliers of raw materials that have an interest in net zero or have a net zero roadmap. So we're forcing the issue back up to the supply chain to say, if you want to deal with us at New Air or Ventilation and Climate, you've got to be involved with net zero. So echo what Sean said, though, that the smaller companies, the SMEs, need a lot of education, a lot of coaching and mentoring to come up to start thinking about net zero and some help.
Yeah.
Matt.
We're finding that we seem to be asked more and more these days for our sustainability credentials in the form of a questionnaire. So we get sent a questionnaire by a customer, whether it's specifically net zero or product carbon emissions or circular economy, things around those themes. But what we're finding is that the format that we get sent these requests, these questionnaires, is different quite often. Also, the questions that we get asked are different. And what I think would be really useful is, and what I'm trying to do within Legrand, is to collect all of those questionnaires and questions together, find the common ground, and try to put together some kind of document that we can issue to the market to go, these are the types of things that we think you might like to ask us, and here are the answers. If we could do that, but it's a devil of a job, because when we get these questionnaires in, I'm sure other people have found this as well, you end up engaging with 5 or 6 or 7 people within your own business and tying them up for 2 or 3 hours, trying to find an answer, especially when we're for us, we're a global company where we've got lots of information in lots of different places. Pulling that together is a real challenge, and that's taking up a lot. I know it's valuable to do it and we need to do it, but I'm hoping that we can find a better way of the kind of scattergun approach that we're doing it with at the moment.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I get sent questionnaires all the time to fill in, and it's set like almost the same question but slightly different, so you have to look for a slightly different number sometimes, or you're being asked to give the embodied carbon for everything you're providing for one project, but for some projects we might be providing hundreds of different things, and so you're sitting there trying to pull out the numbers, and yeah, it can take quite a while. And I think sometimes when these questionnaires are written up, they maybe don't always think about everyone that's going to be given this within the project and how, if that's even possible for that person to respond to those questions. And we find that to be a challenge as well.
Brendan.
Yeah, I think having a some sort of template, especially from a industry body, that everyone can use, and it can be a reference point. So because the biggest thing I've found is a lot of the questions are good, and you can understand why they're asking, but the people who are asking the questions quite often are in a part of a company that it's been sort of put upon them to find this information out, and basically all they do is go on Google and find out what they think they should be asking, and a large percentage of it isn't even relevant. So we're doing a lot of work which isn't relevant, which a lot of the time is out of date, and then we're replicating it time and time again, and because of that, those same questions will get asked again and again, and it becomes self-fulfilling that these information we're giving, which isn't really needed, is getting asked because it's always been asked. So I think having, like Matt was saying, having a sort of consolidated sort of framework or whatever else of these questions, which we all agree is actually that's what they need, we just make it so much easier. And having it sort of endorsed by a BEAMA or whoever else, that this is what's recognised as the way of providing this information, I think will save a lot of time. And the thing is, with everything we do, because we've all said it numerous times, everything we do to get to net zero and everything else takes so much time. If we're wasting time on things which don't really need to be done or being replicated time and time again, it means we're not going to be as successful as we could be getting to that stage. So I think the sooner we can all move and get some sort of uniformity on it all would be good.
I guess that having that uniform framework not only helps in reducing time, but also maybe helps improve credibility of that data being collected. I think one of the big concerns we hear a lot from our membership is also there are requests for all this data, but what are customers doing with it? Is it just a tick box exercise? And unfortunately, in many cases, because they feel they need to be asking that question, or are they actually using that information to benchmark products and make purchasing decisions, not just based on the final cost, but based on the sustainability of that product in its use and full lifespan? And I think BEAMA are, we're already talking to customer sectors for our membership, distributors, wholesalers, contractors, the electricity networks industry, to talk a little bit more about how we can maybe develop that framework and share information with those customer groups on the type of data our members are able to provide into the market now than what we might be able to provide in, say, 5 years' time. And I think that's an important discussion to have with government as well, when it comes to creating more of a regulatory framework around that. Yeah.
I think the people asking the questions would prefer it that way as well, because it makes their job so much easier. So I think it's good for everyone.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Brendan, because I had a conversation with our purchasing manager just this morning, and I'd never thought about this before, but we're asking sustainability related questions of our supply chain as well. So we're being asked them from this end with the client, but when we're going out buying product, we're asking a set of sustainability questions too. So, correlating those two things together to form some kind of framework, I think it'd be a superb thing to do.
Good.
Agreed. Point. And I've made a really strong note in my head as well about Brendan's point early on about honesty and transparency. And I think that's kind of what we're getting at here, isn't it? And kind of helping deliver on net zero. I
think one of the important things is, I think we all have these conversations individually in our own organisations, which is great, because it does sort of, one of the main things to make it work is that you need to create those cultures sort of within the companies, so it becomes sort of second nature. but more important is having those conversations open with everyone else as well. And I think that's the bit, and it's sharing, isn't it? Sharing everything, because it's a new thing. It is a new thing. It's
I agree more, and I think that's what we're trying to do in BEAMA, is facilitate that sharing, but it's got to be done across the supply chain. There's so many other trade organisations we need to kind of bring into some of those discussions as well. I had a question kind of getting into some of the recent political debates around net zero delivery. We had the Committee on Climate Change report published last week, which was a bit damning on some of the government's net zero delivery strategies. But I noticed around that publication, there was an awful lot of debate around how the government should or are dealing with the current cost of living crisis and the current geopolitical pressures that are placed on industry in particular. How should we be dealing with that in terms of net zero delivery? And the question I have for the panel is, do you see the current situation, and recognizing we're under huge amount of supply chain pressures in terms of availability of certain materials and components, rising costs, do you see the current situation in the market and the supply chain as an opportunity or a risk to decarbonisation?
I think it could be both, to be honest. I think at any time of uncertainty, any time of change can bring the biggest of opportunities. Over the last couple of years, or a handful of years, we've had Brexit, we've had COVID. Unfortunately, there's been an awful lot of people that have suffered and had a lot of hardship through those times, both personally and businesses. But also, there's been some incredible opportunities. Brexit has opened up doors for bringing manufacturing back into the UK that we probably got rid of, that we should never have got rid of. And and that's only then been opened up and realised, probably more so than through the hardships of COVID and lockdowns around the world, where stuff couldn't arrive with us, or increased shipping costs and that. If we can bring it all back into this country, and I know that's quite a open statement of bring it all back, of course that's probably borderline impossible, but like I said earlier, we're a nation of engineers, innovators. We've got some incredible sort of minds within our sort of population here, so use them. Let's do it. We need to educate the masses to make Britain great again, as they sort of, as the slogans are. Let's bring all of that back and do it. And in that, I can see the opportunity. If we're not bringing things in from the Far East and we're manufacturing them in the UK, that is a sort of a net zero opportunity, as well as complementing other businesses and other opportunities for other supply chain businesses within the UK to ultimately grow together as well.
I think for me, the cost of living and the fuel poverty crisis that we're facing now goes hand in hand with energy and embedded carbon, because we need to make our building stock more energy efficient. That means insulating and making them more airtight. That will stop the use of energy, so we're using less energy. So it all goes hand in hand. But until we start really ramping up, and I hate to use the word insulate Britain because I don't agree with what they do, but they have a point. We need to insulate more of our properties and create more energy efficient homes and buildings within the UK. 80% of all our building stock for 2050 net zero is already built. It's already there. So we need a big refurb program going on, and to make these more energy efficient and better ventilated for the COVID crisis. And that's great for us, but it really needs to start looking at how we're going to upgrade our existing building stock. And as I said, 80% of it's already built, so it needs to be looked at.
I wonder if there's an issue here around education in some of our younger people coming out into the industry, in terms of a possible skills gap in that area. Because I work with apprentices as well, and also going into schools sometimes and just talking to the kids about, what is engineering, what's it all about, because it's, it's possibly not what they think. And the kids tend to be really, really interested in all of the green issues, but when I go to the apprentices, they're more really geared around just installing the product. as opposed to thinking about what could I do differently? What could I do to help, you know, this journey through to 2030, 2040, 2050 targets that we've all set. So is there something there that needs to be addressed, I don't know, in schools and colleges?
I think as well, like you were saying there with the apprentices, not necessarily sort of bringing forward some of their ideas maybe as well, because like you say, the younger generation, the kids, you look at the Greta Thunberg era and that generation, they're so passionate about the environment, and rightly so. And if we can get that into the apprentices and into the businesses and allow them to think creatively outside the box, rather than we've always done it this way and we're telling them how to install product or how we've done it and how to do it. So how would you do it? Let's see if we've got the next engineer, but also environmentalist amongst us at the same time.
Really, really, really interesting. And then taking it back again to the kind of your manufacturing processes, I guess, Eloise, your target to move away from natural gas use by 2030 in the UK is probably, there's a bit more impetus on that now than there might have been a couple of years ago. So at least it helps push forward some of those changes, and that there's savings to be made for manufacturing businesses in doing that.
Yeah, and I think there's also even a bigger push now towards self-generation, and the ROI of even having solar PVs is a lot stronger than it used to be. So that's a great opportunity to some extent, and we're definitely seeing that. And I think that impetus on really pushing through kind of our carbon pledge and getting to 2030 and seeing what we can do to not rely on natural gas as much. Although switching to electricity is not cheap either, so it's looking at different options and what we can do. But it's definitely it's making the business case look a little bit stronger to some extent, which is, I guess, good. But given the context it's in, probably not good. But yeah.
And that reshoring point, I think Sean made, that's something we're hearing a lot of from our membership and discussing a lot as well, because there are some serious supply shortages in our market at the minute around certain types of steel, grain orientated steel, semiconductor supply into the market. And there's a case for the UK bringing some of that production of those materials, componentry, back to the UK. But I think one of the things that's missing to enable that is certainty of some of the markets that our members sell into. So if you have certainty that investment's going to be made in your marketplace in the UK, then you can maybe justify that investment to reshore. And one of them, it's another motivation, again, coming back to that point around ensuring customers are valuing appropriately that net zero data that you're giving them. If you're manufacturing a genuinely sustainable product, that's being actually accounted for in purchasing decisions, and that could drive reshoring of certain materials and certain components. Really important points, and ones that we're really aware of within BEAMA. I want to just come on to another question, and it also links to the BEAMA climate commitment that many and a growing number of our members are signing up to, and it's been mentioned by a few of you, and that's around offsetting. So the BEAMA climate commitment is based around ensuring science-based approach to target setting, and with that, it's offsetting has a role in some situations, but it should only be used when all your mitigating action has been taken care of at that given point in time. We saw recently the publication of the Voluntary Carbon Markets Initiative Code of Practice, and that's supported by BEIS, by UK government, and that's the first real kind of guide that businesses have had about how and when they should be investing in carbon credits and how to make credible claims against that. And I think that's quite a significant step forward. But I wanted to ask the panel, are any of you actively engaged in the carbon market, and what do you see as its role in your commitment? Brendan.
Am I muted? Yeah, I haven't harped on about being carbon neutral, even though we are, and the reason why is because a part of that is through offsetting, which at the moment it's it's a necessity to be able to do it. And I think we touched on it before. There isn't the supply chain to make sure you can, because you need everything, you know, a lot beforehand to do it. But I think it's just, I think it shouldn't be looked at as a really bad thing, because it's not, because it's you know, it's a lot. There is a benefit, and there's a lot of benefits to it, and it is doing good. But I think it has to be looked at as the worst case scenario for meeting it. So you want to get that down and down and down. And I think the only way of doing that is by looking at your complete supply chain, like we said before. So, yeah.
I think at Schneider, we definitely see a role. It's in our carbon pledge that between 2025 and 2030 we'll offset any residual emission, but that's really under the strong caveat that we are decreasing our emissions as much as possible. And obviously we'll keep decreasing up to 2030. And for us, it's because we don't think the technologies are all there for some of that residual emission that we have, when I think of where we're using some of our natural gas or other fossil fuels. And we've been investing in the livelihood fund since about 2011, and really ensuring that by 2025, when we have to start using offsets, that we've already invested in good projects that are generating high quality gold standard offsets. And that's a key one for us, is making sure that they're high quality.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because I think because there's not enough legislation and everything else to sort of say what is good and what isn't good. And I think it's down to us as individual companies to make sure it is gold standard, and you are doing the right bits. Yeah,
I think it is definitely a necessity at the minute to offset, because that supply chain isn't there in full, and some of the technology, like Eloise mentioned, isn't there yet to do it in full. Electric vehicles, great. Are they the answer? Who knows? I personally don't believe so. It's moving the problem somewhere else, and I could talk about that for hours, but that's not what we're here for. But to me, at the minute, if we can all reduce our emissions as much as possible, whether that is by solar, whether that is by R&D, to look at the products that we are making, to how can we make them more efficiently, how can we make them sort of with a less sort of a carbon weighting to them, and reduce all of that first, offset the balance for now. But they're offsetting projects there's hundreds out there, as we've just sort of alluded to. But if we can get into, there's only so many fields that we can plant trees on to offset these emissions, or seagrass projects, and hundreds and hundreds of different projects. But a lot of people see offsetting as that one little thing of, let's plant some trees to offset what we've done. And as soon as those trees are planted and then fields are full, what's next? And we've got to look at it as the bigger picture. And that's what I genuinely believe as the innovators and engineers and the minds of our country can come up between us to make it, reduce it massively, and really sort of a lot of heavy investment into that research.
Yeah,
I think just to echo what Sean said, our production process, if we look at, since we've been doing the TM65 reports and look at our embedded carbon in our product, it's made us think. We've had to look at different ways of manufacturing, look at renewables. We're looking at PV for all our sites at the moment to put energy back into the grid. Although we buy renewable energies as we do now, we're still looking to generate our own energy, then put that back into the grid. So, but the production process is certainly somewhere where I think as a UK manufacturer, we're really looking inwards now, looking at ourselves, so how can we do it better?
No, and I agree that I do believe quite strongly, actually, that offsetting has quite an important role to play in the global climate change agenda, certainly in the next 10 to 15 years, because that money is vitally important for other countries to develop sustainably, protect indigenous communities, invest in forest and land use projects that are absolutely essential, and the offsetting markets are the main source of that finance. I think what we're really grateful of is more guidance, so that businesses are able to confidently make those claims against their offsetting, and know that what they're buying is is right and it's going to in the right places, if you know what I mean. So I think, and I know, you know, there's the voluntary carbon markets initiative, and we also know, which is kind of targeting more the demand side, and we know that the British Standards Institute are also doing an awful lot of work, which we're engaging with, to kind of create more standardization around the carbon markets, so that businesses like our members can have the confidence to invest there and use them as a key part of their commitments. There's been a few comments and questions in the chat, and with 15 minutes remaining, I want to kind of pick up on some of those, some of the questions. So I hope I can cover most of them. There's a question from John, and I think this relates to some of our discussion around engagement with the supply chain. So he asks, are smaller sized suppliers reluctant to start the net zero journey due to cost implications?
I think they are reluctant, but I personally don't believe it's down to cost. You know, being an SME ourselves, it was, where do we start? I don't think it was down to cost for us. Of course, cost is a factor, and like a lot of things in this world, you know, you suddenly want to buy sustainable, it's more expensive. You only have to walk around the supermarket shelves to know that. But I think as an SME, you know, like I said earlier, it's only myself and my co-director that really started to lead this forward. You know, I'm sure the likes of Schneider and Legrand have got teams of people, which, you know, I would love to have to be able to look into this. But you know, I think the education of carbon neutral isn't necessarily, or reducing carbon isn't necessarily expensive, is already out there. It's just genuinely people don't know where to start.
I'm just looking through some of the comments here, and there was actually a comment, I think, really supporting some of the points you've been making. I think the points that Brendan was making, a comment from Nick Haler: the supply chain need to be educated, and standards need to be developed to save time and effort in providing the detail around carbon reporting. Brendan is quite right, and I agree. And also some comments here. More electric cars sound great, but we need more renewable energy to deliver that. Otherwise, somewhere fossil fuels need to be burnt to get this energy. Moreover, we need a perfect decommissioning plan for the batteries. Agree. I think there's a big piece of work there to look at how we deal with the decommissioning of batteries. And another comment, we should definitely move away from using natural gas. However, we need nuclear energy to do that. So good to start making those moves, but there's also some big changes that government also need to be engaged with to deliver on that. I can't see any further comments or questions coming into the chat, so I will move on. And actually, we may need to start bringing the event to a close. Sadly, time has whipped by, and I think it's been a really informative conversation, and certainly made me feel quite proud in BEAMA that a lot of our members are, you know, delivering a lot of progress on their net zero strategies, and that's really great. I want to give kind of final word though to our panelists before we close the event, and I want to ask each of you, if you were to pick one action, whether that's delivered by you as a company or by government or somebody else, to progress delivery for net zero, what would it be? So I'll come to Brendan first. Oh, you're muted, Brendan. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it's the point I made earlier. More guidance and more. I think it's guidance and more control on it, because I think there's a lot of sort of, not promises, but there's a lot of promises made, and there's a lot of sort of greenwashing which goes on, which when you sort of delve into it, and especially when you're dealing with suppliers tend to, especially sort of offshore, suppliers tend to tell you what you want to hear. And I think there needs to be more of a structure, so you know what you're being told is, I don't know, it can be not improved is too much stronger a word, I think, but I think there has to be some sort of structure, so people are accountable a bit more for it.
Great guidance. Like it. Sean?
I think for me, one word is education. And that's quite obviously broad, but I think we need to educate our next generation that are very passionate about it, that engineering and fields like this are an option to move forward to, and they can combine the two. We need to educate our existing business leaders, especially from SMEs, and not picking on a sector in particular, but like the contracting world, where things are so cutthroat in terms of price that environmental sort of choices don't have to be expensive. And especially from the SME front, is educating that there is answers and there is guidance out there. Obviously there is greenwashing, like Brendan mentioned, and that is a big concern, that people are promising the world and won't deliver. But it is out there, and hopefully with trade bodies' support, that we can get that message across. That in honesty, if we can do it as a business, and if I've done it, then anyone can. It is more than possible. It's just knowing where to start. And like I say, it's only the beginning of our journey still. We want to come away from offsetting, but we need to do it as a whole. And one thing in it as well is that, of course, when the UK announced that we're going to hit net zero by 2050, then of course, being the competitive nature that we all are, someone said, well, I'm going to do it by 2040, someone else says I'm going to do it by 2030, and someone else 2025. But as much as we all say that, as we've discussed today, no one can hit truly net zero until everyone is net zero. So if we all keep working together and collaborating together, then 2050 is achievable, even though that does seem a long way away, 28 years time. But it is possible, and we will make massive headway along the way, if we keep working together.
Good. I really like that education point, and like you say, educate across the supply chain. And that question raised about whether small suppliers are maybe put off because they think it's going to cost the earth. And I think, Sean, you're demonstrating that with innovation, this can be commercially viable and actually benefit a business. And the more we can shout about that, the more we can educate people and businesses that that's the case, the better, really. Stuart?
One thing for me is how we're going to police it, and I'd like to see more emphasis on policing it. So, in 10 years' time, are we going to allow people not to take that journey and then put it out by another 2 years? We've committed to 2050. So I'd like to see how we're going to police this and who's going to police it. And I think that's more aimed at the government. They've made the commitment. They need to put some meat on the bones now and say how they're going to police that going forward.
Yeah, policing and enforcement, so important to ensure that we create a competitive environment around true sustainability. Yeah, agreed. Eloise?
I think one thing is collaboration is really key. So whether that be kind of internal collaboration across teams, a lot of these issues are cross-team, cross-department issues, but also collaboration, I think, across businesses. We all offer different unique perspectives and expertise that we really should be capitalizing on and really working together, especially when a lot of these problems are probably non-competitive issues that we could collaborate on. And I think one more thing is just to be ambitious with goals and targets. Like, this is a crucial moment, and we can't really afford to be cautious either. And if we all achieved our cautious targets, we're not going to get to 2050. So, I think we just need to not be afraid of ambition.
Good point. Good point. Matt?
Yeah, going last out of the 5, I'm quite lucky because I get to hear what everybody else has said first. And do you know what? The first thing I would have said was education, but hearing that from the panel, and so far you got 4 completely different answers, really. So I'll give a 5th different answer. So what I'd like to see is more from a consumer viewpoint, and me being a consumer. I'd like to see a reduction in the cost to participate from a householder's standpoint. So if I wanted to put smart radiator valves in my house and PVs with a battery storage system or something, it's a lot of money, and I don't get a payback for 10 years. So it's something I'd like to see addressed. I know we used to get, various schemes and things, but that's an area that I'd like to see addressed, because if we're going to make our existing building stock net zero by a particular point in time, we need to be able to afford to do it. And I know with all new things, they start out expensive, but then prices tend to come down. I don't know if it will at this particular point with these things. So that's what I'd like to see, reduction in cost to participate from a consumer's perspective.
Great. No, I think 5 really, really important points. And, just to finish from BEAMA's perspective, and especially picking up on the guidance and collaboration point of view. On collaboration, I think we've demonstrated today, and we have in previous events at BEAMA, that there is such an appetite to share experiences on what we're doing here. And it's so valuable because, we haven't done this before. There isn't one kind of guideline that you should follow or one rule of thumb. There are different approaches that suit different companies, different markets, and the more we talk about it, the more we can kind of really help facilitate net zero delivery. So I hope, going forward, BEAMA definitely have an intention to increase more of our collaboration activities with our membership, but also with the wider supply chain and community that have joined this event today. And on guidance, as I said, we are starting to have discussions with the various customer groups that our members sell into: network operators, construction industry, distributors, wholesalers. And I think, we've heard on several events that the need for this kind of framework and more guidance to them on the availability of data for reporting is really key. So I think that's something that we will make sure we put into this year's work plan. But it just leads me really to say a big thank you to our panelists. It's been a really, really interesting discussion today. And yeah, to the audience, the recording of this event will be available to download from the BEAMA website, so you can listen back, you can share it with colleagues, and share it with people that you work with if you think they'll find it interesting, and keep an eye on the website, because we'll run more events like this in the future. But otherwise, big thank you to the panel, and thank you to our audience for your time today, and I'll draw the event to a close. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.